Hey
We're
everybody, it's
going.
August 25th, 2022, and this is the Backdrop Weekly developer meeting. We get together every week to talk about things that are happening in the development world of Backdrop CMS. This week is the last week before the 123 version um, code freeze, which comes up exactly 1 week from today. And so that's going to be our big focus for today is talking about 123 and remaining items that we're still hoping to get into that release. Uh, I'll do some introductions here of those present in the meeting. My name is Nate Lampton. I'm Quick Sketch on the internet. I'm a core committer for Backdrop CMS. And yeah, I am excited. This week I've been doing a lot of work on my Backdrop client, which has been fun, and I wrote a contrib module for it, so that was fun. Uh, let's see, that's it for me. We'll go to Tim and then Robert.
Tim Erickson, St. Paul Tim, in Deerwood, Minnesota. I'm excited about Nate's contrib module. It's a good one. I haven't tried it yet, but it looks good. Uh, yeah, I'm nearing completion of a backdrop, 777 to backdrop upgrade with that I'm really excited about. I've talked about it Backdrop Live, so it should launch in a week and a half. So that's been my excitement. That's it.
Thanks, Tim. Robert and then Joseph.
I'm Robert Lyman, web builder on the internet, coming to you from Altadena, California. I've been working on integrating City CRM into our properties.
Thanks, Robert. Joseph and then Jen.
Hi, my name is Joseph. I'm a programmer from Las Vegas, Nevada, and I've recently been doing Drupal 9 theming and wishing there was an easier way in Drupal to override the homepage.
Yeah. Thanks, Joseph. Finally, Jen.
Classic. Yeah, I'm Jen Lambton, joining from Oakland, California. I am currently working on a revamp of one of my very first Backdrop sites from 2015 and looking at all of the stuff that we built back then because we don't have the stuff that we have in core today and trying to think about how to update things. What I'm working on right now is the conversion to entity reference fields, which I think this site is using both node reference, user reference, and references, or whatever the core one we thought we were going to put in. So it's not using the one we use, but it's using all of the other ones. So yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to clean things up a little bit with that. But yeah, it's been a fun adventure. So good times.
All right, that does it for introductions. Jen, do you want to roll right into community updates too?
Sure. All right, so this week, or actually, I think this came in last week, but we have a new contributor application, Canna Patrick or Conna Patrick. Unfortunately, the person created an application issue, but didn't answer all of the questions in the issue, so it's hard to move forward with approvals because we don't know whether they want to be a maintainer on an existing project, contribute a new project, or help manage issue queues for projects that are already there. So we just need some more information on how to get them into contrib. So just wanted to announce that in case they see this. But yeah, we're happy to have you. Just want to figure out in what capacity. We have a couple of new contributed projects this week too. Video embed field, which I was surprised did not have a stable release before now, and title display, which Nate might choose to tell us about later.
Sure, I'll tell you about it now.
Okay.
So there's a core issue for this sort of functionality. Let's see. So let me tell you what title display does. Title display gives you the option of placing the title field, the node title field, on the Manage Display tab. So you can move the title field in between other fields. It also gives you some options for like what size heading you want, whether it should link, and adding classes. And so the usefulness of this is that we had a site where we had a card display, classic, right? And the image was at the top, and then there was a taxonomy term, and then there was a title at the bottom. And so when displaying this, we could have made templates, but since we have 7 content types and all of them have card displays that would have been 7 templates just to move the title from the top to the bottom. So anyway, that basically moves the title from being at the top to being in as part of the content, which can be helpful for these, like, it's not the page, it's some other representation of a node. Yeah, this relates highly to issue 933 and issue 1950, both of which are kind of similar. 1950 is pretty much exactly what this module tries to do, and where it doesn't revamp the way the title field works or is stored, but it changes the way that it's configured. And then 933 is actually like make the entire node title into a reusable field. So until we have those things, we have this contrib module, which might help some people in similar situations.
So I just wanted to interject that this is 1950 issue is number 7 on our new feature survey. So
yeah, great call out. It's actually one of the things that this is the first unbelievably the first commercial backdrop site that I've assembled, and the things that I find lacking are very well known. So yeah, it feels it's kind of it's I appreciate having the background knowledge that other people have encountered this problem before, but it's also really nice to encounter it firsthand, because a lot of things I hadn't actually understood quite the way that it was hindering people, and now I've got a better experience there. So anyway, that's been great. I mean, so much that I ended up making a contrib module. And had this project had a longer timeline, I would have pushed hard for fixing it in core instead, but it launches in a couple of weeks. So there you go. That's what contrib is for, to fill the holes while core gets it together. Okay, that's it for contrib updates. Let's see. So the forum post for this week, we have some comments on things that were brought up. Both of the specific issues were relating to 123 features, which is great. So we can just talk about those. And since this is the last meeting before the feature freeze, that's kind of where we're going to focus today on 123 issues. So let's take a look at your issue first that you're advocating for, Tim. Allow the admin to hide the title on comments. And then you brought up a related issue to that as well, and I'm curious how that's related. So why don't you give us a summary of where hiding comment titles is and what we need to do yet?
wait a second. I'm not sure what you're saying about I brought up a related issue. You mean, so the Indigozella came up with, Indigozella came up with a concern that we hadn't thought of before with the hide comment titles, which is that we changed one of the variable names. And I don't, anyways, we changed one of the variable names, and she did a search in the contrib and found that there's a number of modules that, for example, well, the most common use case is that there are config files in modules that set up like new content types and use the old variable name. There's also a number of tests that use the old variable name for tests in various contrib modules. And I don't know what else. To be honest, I haven't had a lot of time to really process all of this. I think Indigozella has proposed a possible solution to this. It would seem to me that the config files is something that, well, one, I'm not sure how serious of a problem that would be. And two, is something that probably could be worked around, given that I could see that I'm responsible for about 7 or 8 of those config files, and I could make sure that they get updated. But anyways, I honestly am not really the best person to say, like, I don't understand yet the entire implications of this. And hopefully Nate or Jen, either of you have had a chance to look at this and can maybe I mean, I definitely see where there's a problem, but I don't know how serious of a problem it is.
Hmm. Yeah, this is interesting. And sorry, I was mistaken. I was getting issues confused. So
Sure.
yeah, okay. So let's see. Indigo Zella's comment. Yeah, so we changed a value of something in the config file. Um, I see. It's a good question. Because our backwards compatibility policy, is we put forward as best an effort as we possibly can on maintaining compatibility, especially this is a point release, so it's not like a major set of changes or anything like that, and then we deprecate the old stuff. Yeah, I see that the current implementation takes care of existing sites, like if they have any existing content types, it converts them via an update hook. Probably also does manage moving from Drupal 7 because it moves you into the old setting and then moves you into the new one after running the update hook. Yeah, so the problem is people's sites will probably be fine as they update, but if they install contrib modules that haven't updated, they'll end up using the old setting.
So there's a
So
couple of good recommendations in the issue thread here. One of them is to add like a more elaborate helper function to help determine the status of that variable that checks both the old values and the new values, and we can mark that function as deprecated. And that way it goes in as deprecated, but at least anyone who's running an existing site with the wrong values in it would be fine. Also, there's a concern because contrib modules add this, they could add the module after the update hook is run, and those new content types wouldn't get updated. There's also an issue, and this is the one I think you were talking about that Tim referenced, maybe Greg referenced it here, not Tim though, about a feature that would allow us to deprecate properties for config. So that we would have like a sort of a proper API for changing a config value name. And if we do that, then at any point in the future, we could leave the old name now and fix it once we figure out how to do that cleanly. Maybe we never figure out how to do that cleanly, but we do at least have an issue to investigate it.
yeah, I think that's an interesting topic to discuss, but it's not exactly, this is not like we just change the name of something, literally the behavior is different too. And so yeah, but also I feel like the we need to find our backwards compatibility document, or I need to find it, because I think that we state certain things are not guaranteed API compatible all the time, like the structure of forms, for example, database tables, and I think the config structure also probably falls in that category of we don't guarantee this, that we're expecting that we need to change these things on a regular basis. And so, yeah, I kind of think that solving this at the config level, or trying to add backwards compatibility at the config level, could be a good convenience thing, but shouldn't be the way that we solve this problem, just like every time we have one of these config changes. Yeah, I think I'm trying to think if there's like what I would like to see, I think, is if the old setting exists in config, that it's still like respected or converted into the new behavior. So if you find if the comment module loads the config, sees the old thing, then it says, oh, that thing should just be this thing now, which I think is basically similar to what Indigo Zella is suggesting, that we add a function that just checks one or the other, and then we use that in all places in the time being. And the idea of making it deprecated, like we don't even really need to make it deprecated. It could just continue to exist, and just we would remove the old syntax inside of that function at some point. It would make it a little bit unnecessary, perhaps, because it's like if it's just one line, get the config, maybe it doesn't need a function. But yeah, but just make it a private function, and then then you'll be done, you know. Like we could
Should
remove it at any time we want.
should we also be updating the value so that like, okay, we checked the old value, but rather than leaving it there and respecting it, we're going to set it to the new one? Or are we just is it just a check?
Yeah, well, what I think would end up happening is that if you resaved the content type, like if you loaded the content type, it would show you the converted value because it loaded from the wrapper function. And then when you save it, it would save the
Save
new
the new
config
one.
value. And so it wouldn't do it like on the fly. It would just do it if you resaved the content type, then you're probably going to be good. Considering the amount of time that we have, yeah, I think that that's the, yeah, that should be fine. um,
Okay.
but at the same time, it's like that. I think that's like the best way we can handle it. But a part of me also just looks at this going, is this important to handle at all? You know, it's like this setting is not like a total deal breaker for the way that stuff is displayed. So, yeah,
Sure. I mean,
It does seem like it's used in an awful lot of places, though. And if we could prevent all those people from having to deal with why their site's broken after the last core update, I think that would be good.
I mean,
well,
at
it
least
won't quite be that way though. It'll be their site will be fine because the site will get upgraded. But then when they install new functionality, it won't work the way that the developer had
Well,
originally
not if they're
intended.
like running tests and contrib modules that are still referencing the old version, right?
That's yeah.
Because it's contrib that we're worried about, and there are instances that like the update hook isn't going to catch
Yep.
at any point.
That has happened. I mean, that happens from time to time anyway, and is kind of okay because we're not breaking people's sites. We're causing an inconvenience for contrib developers, and that sort of stuff does come up not infrequently.
Does the backwards compatibility document you were referring to, does it stipulate like what happens when something isn't updated as being a criteria of whether we should worry about it or not?
Let's find it. Yeah, I'm like, where is this document? I know that we have it somewhere.
Because I wonder if it's like, if we're checking a bunch of variables that don't exist, there could be like PHP warnings about like undefined indexes or whatever. Maybe those don't matter, but on a high performance site, flooding the logs could cause a lot of issues, and that could cause like a site to go offline. But on a small site, 5 errors on, I don't know, a page or something isn't going to be a real issue. But if it's something just like the new feature doesn't work, right? That could be different. I don't know. I don't know if that's even part of it, or if it's just this is just what it is, not how to decide whether something needs
Yeah,
to
this
be.
is just what it is. Yeah, which
Okay.
I think is still important that we stay in line, right?
Yeah.
So, so this is slash releases. So it turns out this is a number of useful things in it. But the API compatibility is down at the bottom. So things that we don't modify: public functions, public and protected methods and classes and interfaces, hooks, front-end markup, callbacks and templates, and the contents of the variables, which this is like, maybe
That's it.
we have indeed done these things, but this isn't the specific problem that we're facing right now. We've kind of already crossed this bridge on dealing with it.
Yeah.
Form API element properties. But the things that can change: private functions, private methods, form structures and renderable arrays, database and configuration schemas. So that's this one that we're talking about: settings available in settings.php. Yep. So yeah, what we're talking about here specifically is configuration schema, which, yeah, it doesn't fall under the guarantee, at least. Yeah, anybody else have thoughts on this? I'm kind of waffling about whether or not we need anything at all, but I
want to
think
know what
maybe
happens
what I'm
when
saying,
it doesn't, like what happens when you're running one of those modules. Like it might be good to install, I don't know, all of the modules that are using the incorrect version, upgrade core with this patch, and then just see what happens to your site. And if it like still works as expected, but it's got true false instead of 0 1, you know, but you haven't changed that, then that's totally fine. But if you start getting like more serious errors, or I don't know.
Yeah. Well, the other side of this, I think that would be nice.
Mhm.
I wonder if that should be like a gate on this. But I also think that so I'm off in between not doing anything at all, because I think that it's kind of the damage would be minimal, and the existing sites get converted. So doing nothing or doing Indigo Zala's approach, I think, would be going the extra mile. And so if we just are like, well, let's just go the extra mile because it's not actually that much more work, then if we do Indigo Zala's wrapper, I think that's as good as we can possibly do. So if that's what
And just
would
to
make
clarify,
people feel better, then we should go with that route maybe.
so all the recommendations are involving making the change to the name. We're not thinking about leaving it with the previous name that no longer matches what it does. Just to be clear. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that that's better than
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
than having the same name that does something different. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think I would sort of agree with you, but you're like, damage will be minimal. I want to make sure that's actually the case, which is why I was like, we should try it. Because if true, false, and 0 1 just like evaluate, you know, like they're supposed to, and it doesn't matter even if you like pull, and I don't know if that's the only issue that's going to come up here, but whatever. There's a reason that we mapped it the way we did, and it's because it's the same logically. But I don't know what that would do like in running a test. I don't know. So yeah, worth trying.
Okay, so
So I think, Tim, next steps here would be, and I'm happy to do this maybe later today, is to throw a contrib module on and test it. And if there's nothing bad that happens, then we just say it's fine. And if there is something bad that happens, then there's another question of like, how do we decide if what happens is bad? But then it would be like, let's take a look at what this function would look like that Zala's proposing and see if we can just throw that in and not have to worry about it.
So I'll just say that I would appreciate any help on this. And if it does turn out that we need to add that function wrapper or whatever, and somebody else is able to jump in and just do it, I'm happy to turn this over. I don't want to be in the way, and I'm not sure that I'm the best person to be doing that. So, especially in the tight timeline, because I have a busy week. So, okay.
Okay. Anything else on hiding title comments, Tim?
I don't think so. Other than that, it was ready for review again. I had addressed all the previous issues. There was one, Gregory Klonos raised an issue about the not the variables, the constants. We had constants named 0, 1, and 2, and he wanted us to give them semantic text names instead of 0, 1, and 2. And I had went ahead, and I think Doc Wilmot said, sure, that makes sense. So I had went ahead and made that change. I don't remember if that change, well, I think that change might conflict with this because is it possible that they wouldn't evaluate as well? Well, no, it doesn't matter. Anyways, I don't know if anybody wants to look at that. That was the other thing that had happened that I don't remember now or understand if that is influenced by this. But
yeah, I don't. Yeah, it seems like it's the same problems. I'm in favor of that change too. I think that looks a lot better. I really appreciate the way that that looks when you're reading the config files, because the 0, 1, and 2 doesn't mean anything,
Right.
you know, without the names of the constants, and that's what ends up in config. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I still regret that we have this for config override. It's like 1, 2, and 4 or something crazy like that. It's just like, what is that? What does that even mean? Yeah.
Well, that's it then.
Okay. All right, let's talk about the next issue that Indigo Zella raised. She's hoping to. This is kind of like the rabbit out of the hat issue for this release. You know, like, hey, we weren't planning on this until just recently. And that's issue 4255, which is adding a new date widget for an HTML5 input, which I'm a little bit surprised that we don't have already, because we're using HTML5 input for the like schedule date and for like the actually I think just the schedule date, like when you schedule the publishing of something, but that's not a widget, right? And so this is for date fields that you can use an HTML5 input element. So basically, it's like, instead of using anything that's a JavaScript library or anything like that, it's just specifying the type equals, what is it called, date time. And so the browser handles all of the rendering of the date field input. And these have gotten a lot better in recent years. And this looks like it would be a really nice enhancement. So let's see, the issue is 4255, has a pull request, needs code review. Indigo Zella has been getting some pretty good feedback in here. Gregory, Yorkshire, Pudding have been posting things. Looks like the three of them are going back and forth on this. I read over the code. It looks good implementation wise. Greg already raised the same thing that I kind of have a question about, which is just deciding the name of this, that the name of the widget is date_h5 widget, which is a little bit unusual. So yeah, I think other than name spacing things, though, this looks really pretty great. Anyway, this could use more feedback and review. There is also, kind of interestingly, some discussion about Internet Explorer and other browser support. But for something like this, I think that it's not really relevant, because what we're talking about is we're literally giving people the option to use a browser native widget, and then whether or not the browser supports that or not is that site's individual decision. We're not replacing something with something new. We're making something new that is a choice that people can opt into. So they get to decide whether or not it works for their purposes or not. So yeah, I think I think conceptually this looks really great. Does anybody have any thoughts or feedback on that issue? Yeah, I think we can do it. I think 1 week is enough time to make that happen. I don't think there's test coverage. that probably being the thing that needs some work. But since this is mostly all of the display and everything like that is all browser specific, and the testing framework doesn't use a browser, it's really just going to be configuring a field and then making sure that appropriate attributes are assigned to that field on the output. And that's really all that we can test, which is fine. Okay, let's see. Let's run through the other issues for 123. So entity reference module issue 1301. This was merged months ago. That is in a really good place. So entity reference is now part of core. The upgrade path is included. We have an update hook that notifies people that they're running 2 versions of the module at the same time. Not to mention, we have the new very helpful status report message that identifies when you have the same module installed in multiple places, and will advise you to fix that. Let's see, we also had follow-ups to this issue There were a couple of bug fixes to entity reference that were made in the contrib module after it was merged, and those fixes have also been merged into core. That's issue 5665. That one's ready to go, or has been merged. And then the kind of big deal that's happened in the last couple of weeks since we had another meeting is that the return value for the file URI method changed. It's kind of funny after reading the policy earlier in this meeting where it's like, and these are the things we broke this release. But this is for adding universal support for referencing all types of entities equally, that there was one inconsistency in our API for the file entity. And we extensively evaluated possible impacts of this change and found it to be minimal. So we searched all of Contrib for all usages of this method, and it's not used anywhere. So I think the due diligence on that one has been done. And that also is like, if there ever was time to justify it, it's now, because we added entity reference at the same time. So as far as this feature is concerned, it's complete. We're ready to ship it. There are additional follow-up items, though, and the first one of them is issue 5633, which is separating term references out of taxonomy module. And the reason why we would want to do that is because in the future, we will probably not turn on term reference module out of the box, and we will turn on entity reference out of the box instead, and then use entity references for everything, including term references. But for now, yeah, right now term references are part of taxonomy module, and so we need to separate it out in order to turn it off, but leave taxonomy module on. So that issue 5633 has a pull request, but I honestly don't think that we need to rush this. And honestly, it might even be better if we left it a little while to not like change everything all at once in the way that references are working. And then longer term, there's issue 51 apparently that is we would remove the taxonomy term reference field. But that's a backdrop 2 sort of issue. Okay, so entity reference is looking great. Thanks HerbDuel for merging that file URI signature change. That was appreciated. Let's see. Other items we've gotten here. Jen, how are we feeling about field groups?
So
Issue 647.
I did go in and remove the vertical tab, the like weird user interface cruft that was left over, and I think that it looks good. But Herb added a couple of comments on the pull request about sort of leftover code in there that we aren't using anymore. And so I'm doing some sort of cleanup on it to make sure that what's in there is all stuff core is using. Nothing extra.
Okay.
Any chance this gets done this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think what would be really helpful for me is if people could go test the sandbox and make sure it works how you would expect field group to work, with the exception of the clone option, which isn't included. And as long as everybody thinks that it looks fine, what's left is like code cleanup, and that we can definitely do in a week. But if there's like something fundamentally wrong with like how stuff works, that would be a problem.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would fully expect, Jen, that feedback cycle will raise some concerns, and then this will probably, I mean, the odds of this, I don't even think a week is enough time for that cycle to fully happen. So I think it's pretty unlikely that this will be a 123 item.
Okay.
Sorry, you look a little a little
Oh yeah, I
disappointed.
mean it's interesting though because this is one of those things that like whoever's voting on our poll seems to think is important for core, but all the people who are working on core are like not really interested in testing it because it's been ready for testing for like 2.5 months, right? But it's like maybe it's not a priority, right? So yeah, I don't know. I think it's
Well,
fine.
yeah, there's a huge disconnect, I think, between like, you know, what core developers want and what users want, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah, but I'm
And
not sure that all the people who are voting on the polls are not core developers
mhm.
either. Like I
Well,
don't
there's
know
also the
where.
disconnect between what is wanted and what is hard, right?
Or like what you think sounds like a good idea versus how much effort you really want to put into making it happen. You're like, yeah, I guess that seems good. Vote, right? But then you're like, oh, I don't really want to test it. So
Yep. Yeah, I feel that way about multiple
most
file
things.
uploads.
Oh
That's what
yeah.
like I've really wanted that for a long time, and just the amount of effort that it takes to put in to like get it is very high. Yeah. Although it's like it's been started and stopped a couple of times, so hopefully, I don't know, someday. Okay. Let's see. Add title or hide title on comments. We talked about that one. Oh, my issue, kind of my issue. Issue 5348, which is allowing custom validation messages on required fields. I had been the advocate for this, but I took myself off earlier in the cycle. But now that Gregory has been back in our issues, he was the original advocate for it, and so he was excited to come back and see that that was progressing. So that was great that we got some additional feedback from him. He checked out the weird exceptions and situations that I encountered with his original pull request. It sounds generally like he is in favor of all of the changes that have been made and isn't opposing anything at this point. However, the pull request is still um, marked as needs code review. Oh, looks like, oh, Robert, you gave it a code review a week ago. Thank you. So it looks like I need to go back in and oh yeah, it looks like it's just some typos and wording in code comments, so really minimal. Looks like I just need to go back and make those changes. And so yeah, there's a good chance that that will go in. It's not exactly like a banner feature or anything like that because it has no impact on end users, but
Right.
could be a useful form API addition.
Sure.
Let's see, and let's check if there's anything else in the 123 milestone still. That titles field group. Oh, there's this config get data and config set data issue, which is an API enhancement. Only Okay, looks like I actually code reviewed this months ago. I said it looks good, and the only thing that we need to do is add a since line indicating when the version, like when it was added. And so this looks like it just needs like one person to take a look at it, and then it'll be ready to go. Let's see, I think Jen, you might have been the person. No, John Franklin filed the pull request. So I think that's probably a core committer issue that whoever reviews that should also like make the final modifications to make that happen. Let's see, and we also have issue 3872, which is cleaning up the user account form with vertical tabs. This got put in kind of inadvertently because it doesn't actually have an advocate at the moment. It has a pull request, but hasn't there hasn't been activity on this since the end of June. So I'm not sure about that one. That'll be like a, you know, if it's possible, then great, but I wouldn't get my hopes up about having that happen. I also have some slight concerns around, you know, this is like could have an impact on people's sites, you know, on their user edit pages. That's pretty substantial, but probably mostly in a good way, but I could see this being potentially problematic for uh, like social sites where there's lots of users that actually visit their user profile pages and don't use the administrative form, so they or administrative theme for that page. So users seeing their own profiles. The introduction of vertical tabs to front end theme could be a little dicey, because I think that's something that requires specific styling, and most front end themes don't account for vertical tabs, in my experience. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting like thought of like how do we need to accommodate for that. But that's it. That's it for 123 issues. Anything else 123 related you guys would like to talk about?
Well, I mean, at this stage, I'm always looking for low-hanging fruit,
Yeah, totally.
things that are just about ready. And my issue about the 80% rule, which we don't really have to get into that, but I think isn't a low-hanging fruit. It's a PR that Jen did a while back. I reformatted it right around the last release. But the 80% rule comes in, and that the one of several people. I mean, I think I marked the PR as well. I marked it as worked for me, but I had sort of re-rolled it. So somebody said maybe someone else should mark it works for me. But anyways, it could be ready. I think there's just not a consensus right now that it should go in, although most people, I think the only one that's raised an objection is one person based on the 80% guideline. So we could talk briefly about that, like whether or not that should be an obstacle on this issue, whether or not something we should get in, and then we could do some testing and get it in.
Which issue is it that you're
I
talking about?
apologize. I apologize for being vague. It's the adding a visibility rule for depth of taxonomy. I don't have the issue number in front of me. Jen might. She just updated it yesterday too.
Yeah, it's in the agenda. 2955.
Okay.
But there's a handful of these too. There's also the
Right.
like user compare visibility rule, and there's
Right.
the term like field value visibility rule. There's just a whole bunch of stuff that like wasn't included when we made layouts, because layouts only needed to be like a minimum viable replacement for panels, but panels had like a million features. It was like views. You could do so much stuff with it. And so the question now is like, okay, well, we could go back and add all of the stuff that we left out, but like every one of those features isn't an 80% use case, right? Like
Right.
views, every one of the features in views, as Tim brought up, is not an 80% use case. But views as a whole is a very powerful tool, and having all of those edge case features gives you a lot more flexibility. So the question is, do we relegate this to a contrib module and have people just sort of think, oh, layouts isn't that great, and then one day they'll stumble across the module and be like, oh my gosh, this is all the stuff I always needed? Or do we just pack it in all at the very beginning and have them have that all the options? And that is a good question. I don't really know the right answer to that. I'm sort of on the same boat with Tim here, where we're both like, having a lot of options is what makes the tool really powerful. And if it's hard for people to know
Right.
that they need to even look for something else, then that's an issue. But yeah, I mean, there's a handful of them. I think all of those issues could sort of be lumped together. And if we wanted to make a contrib module that included all of the stuff that was in panels and not in layouts, we could do that. And that might be a good short-term solution too.
Joseph, do you want to say something? I saw you unmuted.
My preference would probably be to, like, if we have a set of them that were in panels, then those ones should probably all be in core, so that people who expect features from panels to work when they migrate, like, they'll just work. On a slightly funnier note, though, Jen's comments reminded me of like early on in Drupal 7's lifetime, there were often sessions at camps that were titled things like 30 modules you should install on every website.
Totally. Yeah, and that's the thing that we're trying to avoid, right? If you're installing them
Right.
on every website, then they should just be part of core. Totally. Yeah, that's yeah, totally valid. Yeah, I found another contrib module that we had included in core at some point. I think, Jen, I mentioned it to you this week, but I can't remember what it was. Like I just ran across something. I was like, oh, that's another contrib module that's in core, and we didn't even realize it'd been merged in because there's a contrib
Yeah.
module for everything. Um, well, yeah, I'm also like I'm in favor of this sort of thing. The I mean, yeah, the 80% rule is really just a fuzzy thing. And what we're talking about, this is like it's on our values page, our philosophy, about simplicity and focus. I don't actually think I thought that we had 80% in here, but we don't. Well, anyway, focus is include features for the majority. It says Backdrop Core should only include features and tools that benefit the majority of sites that are running it. And I think that's, this is philosophy, right? It's not actually practice, but it should be our, it's our guiding principle. I think one aspect of this, though, is that we don't want to add things that confuse or hinder users, and so this is getting into a category where it's only showing up if you're already working in this particular part of functionality, because I think that this is dependent upon a taxonomy term context, isn't it? Or is it?
Yeah, it's a visibility condition, so you're only going to see it when you're adding conditions, and it depends on a taxonomy term context, so it'll only appear when you have that context added to your layout.
Right. So it's a sort of thing that's like, if you have that context added, you want this sort of thing related to, taxonomy terms, you want it to be there. And I think that there's probably similar capabilities within views that are also in core. It's like a lot of things end up in core because they were in contrib first, and then when they get pulled in, it's like, oh, well, we probably wouldn't have added that to core, but contrib would, and we have to keep it for the compatibility. So I don't know. This is kind of, it's almost one of those situations because layouts is so heavily based on panels that panels had something and we don't. So it's kind of like it could have gotten in that way as well. I don't know. I feel like if we get too deep into the philosophy of things, it's just like I think just like the practicality of this doesn't hurt existing users, is fairly simple to implement, provides useful functionality, seems like a win, So, yeah.
I mean, most visibility conditions aren't used on 80% of sites. Most sites probably use one or two of them, but different sites use a different mix. And the value of having a nice suite of conditions to choose from is good. So yeah, I'm totally in favor of this.
Yeah. All right. Well, basically no opposition here, but yeah, the thing about, just generally the 80% rule and the simplicity guideline, I don't know. It's a principle, but not a rule. We were talking about what other thing we call this besides a rule.
It's a guideline.
Yeah, it's a guideline. Yeah, exactly.
Tim, you're muted.
I was just going to say that's a discussion that we can continue to have later. But for next week, this is potentially, it needs some testing and code review, but this could be another low-hanging fruit. And as Jen pointed out, I think there's at least two, maybe three of these visibility conditions, all of which could be pretty low-hanging fruit because none of them are very much code, are they? So they're pretty easy to test, they're pretty easy to code review, and they could get into this next issue. So I'll just mention we didn't schedule any sprints, last minute sprints this time. which maybe is good because it means we're not sprinting at the end. But if anybody wanted to this weekend, we could schedule some time to try to get a few of these little things taken care of and maybe solve my issue, the high tidal line comments. I don't know. I don't feel strongly about doing it, but if people are interested, I would be there. I'll leave it at that. Ping me if you want to sprint this weekend.
Okay. Let's see. Laren joined us late in the meeting. Before we close, Laren, I wanted to just check if there was anything you wanted to bring up or mention.
No, I was trying to lurk on Facebook or on YouTube, and I clicked the wrong link.
Oh, so here we are. Okay, well, let's close for today. It's the top of the hour. And so, yeah, thank you again, everyone, for joining these meetings. Thank you for those that watch online or accidentally join. And yeah, we've got a busy but not too busy week ahead of us prepping for the 123 release. And I feel like I should mention this anyway, that this is only the feature freeze. We still have another additional 2 weeks before 123 comes out, which will be September 15th, as always. So thanks again, everyone, for your work and contributions, and we'll see you next week.